Good morning, everyone. This is Barbara, and we're here continuing our series of 2 webinars celebrating Women's Month. Today, we have someone very special, our incredible Natália Affonso. And Natália will be... Hi. Hey, Nati.
Hey.
Thank you very much for taking part in our project.
Thank you for having me.
Spending Sunday morning with us. Okay, so Natália Affonso has been an English teacher for almost 9 years. She holds a CELTA and a master's degree in literatures of the English language from the State University of Rio de Janeiro. She's also a researcher and translator. Her focus is on gender, sexuality, race, Caribbean literature, and decolonial theory. So, without further ado, I'll give you Natália Affonso.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Brow team, and everybody who's watching us. I decided to bring a topic that's very dear to me. So, all right. So, let's get started. Okay. So the title of this webinar is Research and Reflect, Don't Just React and Reject, because as teachers, I believe we have a fundamental role in creating this culture of reflecting and not only reacting, especially in the age of social media and in a time when a lot of people have had their feelings hurt. And we have this impulse to simply reply without careful consideration. So I broke down my presentation into 5 parts. Bear in mind some things I would like us to consider before I start. Then human reaction, how we act, and some things that we do without careful consideration sometimes. Information literacy, which is one of the 21st century skills, and it's something we should promote to our students and teach them how to do it and how to be information literate. Then I chose a Facebook post and 2 course books to analyze and see how of these things we've covered on the webinar play out, and then I have some final considerations. All right. So the first thing I would like us to bear in mind is that regardless of our best efforts, teachers are still seen as bearers of knowledge, keepers of truths. So more often than not, our students will see us as the source of knowledge. If they respect us, they will believe what we say. So we have to have a lot of responsibility about what we say, even and I know this is controversial, but even outside the classroom. And with that in mind, teachers have to know that your worldview is not the only way to view the world. And what does that mean? It means that our perceptions, our notions of ethics, the way we behave, we interact with each other, they are all learned behavior. And different cultures, different communities, they have diverse ways of seeing the world we live in. So we cannot impose our worldview on others. And I know this is hard to do. It's hard not to do. For instance, during the 8th of March this year, I saw a teacher on my timeline who posted something like, so let teacher Jane Doe explain. Those women who walk around naked or who defecate on the street, they are not feminists. That's not feminism. Well, in fact, that is a form of protest in some branches of feminism. So when you're trying to say what is and what is not feminism, and speaking against the actions and the protests of some women, you're actually taking part in the oppressive system you wish to fight against. So that is very complex. We have to know there are many different kinds of feminisms in order to be able to actually advocate feminism and in a broader, more encompassing, respecting way. Especially when you are a teacher, because then, as I said before, you are an authority and people believe what you say. So the different branches of feminism are just one example of how things um, are not binary, as our worldview has taught us to think. It's not everything right or wrong, yes or no, black and white. This is feminism, this is not. So I just chose like 11 branches of feminism, but there are so many. So this goes to show how much research and careful reflection and consideration we have to go through. Which leads us to my next point is you have to understand that you're not going to understand everything. Not at first, at least. And that's okay. But what we cannot do is that it's getting something we don't understand and starting to ridicule it or be violent towards someone who's talking about it, who experiences it. And this is funny, when we are language teachers, right at the beginning of our careers, sometimes we are terrified when a student asks us a question and we don't know, or teacher, how do I say rebimboca da parafuseta in English? And then we're frozen because that expectation of being bearers of knowledge is still within us. And what we learn as we gain more experience is that it's okay not to know a word. We're not dictionaries, we're people, but we do know how to access that information, how to get the meaning, get the word, get the reference. So that's our power, and we should take that to every sphere of our teaching and of our lives as well. One important point about this is that you don't have to understand everything. And then there are ways of trying to better understand the topic, the issue, the idea you're coming across. You can do research, of course, Google's there, but you can also do some crowdsourcing. We have this amazing community that is Broad. So there are almost 20,000 people there. Post something, ask for help, ask for input from people who might have more experience than you. It's okay, it's good. All right. So about human reaction, I brought this image that illustrates Piaget's idea of how we acquire language, right? We add new information to existing knowledge. This was just to create a parallel, because psychologists always also say this. This has been a matter of culture studies. Stuart Hall, for instance, says that we learn things and we feel comfort. There's accommodation in knowing that. And when something goes seemingly against what we believe, we are thrown off balance. Children are more readily accept new information or new concepts. But as adults, we seem to have lost this ability, and I think we should regain that, our ability to deal with things that are not pardon, deal with things that may seem strange or unusual, or they're far from our reality, without a violent reaction. All right. So I decided to bring this example. Someone I have known for many, many years sent me this meme, and which I find very disturbing. I don't find it funny at all. And they sent me this, and they said, "This is my mantra." But this is a person who has never talked about dieting in their lives. Why are they replicating this? They probably have seen this in a group of friends and everybody thought that was funny. And then they decided to send this to me. But it's not truly who they are. So what happens when we are in a group and information is just put there loosely and you see a lot of people reacting? You want to be a part of the group. So sometimes there's not a lot of reflection on what that actually encompasses, on what that actually means. And then this person replied, just to push my buttons. I've never wanted to diet, but all the ladies talk about it, and now I want to engage in inclusion movements. So yes, it was just to push my buttons. But this kind of distortion, we know that it happens. Women's movements are not about this, but it's very easy to say, oh, women are talking about this, I want to be more like women. So we have to be very careful about the kind of discourses and images we are reproducing, right? So, ethical responsibility. Ethical responsibility is the ability to recognize, interpret, and act upon multiple principles and values according to the standards within a given field and a context. And our students are expected to do that in a second language, in a foreign language. And what comes with language is that like the different cultural contexts that come with language, and students have to deal with that. So sometimes their local worldviews are not enough to account for the diversity they'll meet. And so students explore various complexities, dynamics, and issues surrounding behavior and ethical practices in order to understand best ways to make decisions and resolve issues at personal, group, and societal levels. So students should be ready to handle communication on these three levels. Not simply say, oh, it's my opinion, this is what I think, that's it. That's not acting ethically responsible, in an ethically responsible way. This definition I extracted from the State University of New York, and this page is actually very interesting because the first thing we have is like questions to consider about ethical responsibility. How did I learn about ethics in this field? What do I agree or disagree with? So this question is fundamental. For instance, I studied in a very conservative school. I didn't know it was a very conservative school though, because they had this discourse of solidarity, everybody's equal, but we did not learn, for instance, about feminism. It was a Catholic school, by the way. We did not learn about racism. I was taught that racial slurs were bad, but I never learned about structural racism, for instance. So we are invited to reflect on how we are taught ethical parameters, moral parameters. And in the case that cannot account for the diversity, the complexity of our society, we should be able to reassess and reconfigure our ethical parameters. All right. Now, information literacy, it's one of the 21st century skills. We quite often talk about that, right? And information literacy is a set of abilities requiring individuals to recognize when information is needed and have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively the needed information. So This might seem obvious to some people, but as we see in arguments very frequently, a lot of people say, oh, it's my opinion, but it's what I think. In instances when it's not a matter of opinion, there's factual research, there's data, that is relevant to the discussion, not just ones on impressions. So our students must be able to understand when they need to, not only our students, we, us as teachers as well, we have to recognize, no, I need to do more research. I don't have enough information to form an opinion or to take part in a debate. And knowing that, the next movement is to learn how to locate the information they need. And students don't know that. Yeah, we hear things like they're digital natives, or they spend a lot of time on computers. Yes, they do. But our students don't know how to Google. And I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating. So actually, open the Google page, teach them how to search for keywords, teach them how to assess if a website is reliable or not, or teach them what are the implications of this newspaper, of that newspaper. And from that, we have to help them in learning how to effectively use this sort of information. I remember once I asked students to prepare a presentation about a famous person. We had been studying adjectives and achievements. And on the first day, they all came basically reading the Wikipedia bio. Beyonce was born in reading all of like the family history. And I was like, this is not what I asked you to do. But then I realized I hadn't given them enough support to produce the kind of presentation I expected from them. So it was actually my fault. They did what they could, or they did what they knew. So from then on, I started to teach my students how to prepare presentations before asking them to present things. So it's our responsibility to know what has to be taught as well. We shouldn't take a lot for granted, because teachers are around in schools, even parents, they think that students know how to present things. They know how to select information. But that's not true a lot of, in many situations. All right. So this website from Medicine College also gives us nice guidelines about information literacy. You can access, I can send you the slides later on. You can access that on their website. But they have these bullet points to talk about how you should develop information literacy. Okay, and I decided to do that with their website. So awareness of how you engage with the digital world. I Googled what is information literacy because I wanted a definition of it, that definition I showed you before. I found this website, how you find meaning in the information you discover. So I saw this, what's a good definition of information literacy? And then that was exactly what I was looking for. And I thought I'll be giving a seminar, a webinar to teachers. They will be more or less familiar with the concept of information literacy, and they can easily understand the words they use here, the concepts they use here. So this is meaningful to my presentation. This is relevant to my presentation. How to articulate what kind of information you require. This is something that we should do in our classrooms. We should ask students, so we're going to debate this, we're going to have a debate on this topic. What do we need to know before we start? How to use information ethically. If you notice, I put the source on every slide. You can also have the references at the end of your presentation, but always make sure to use the reference and teach your students how to refer to their source materials. Understand the role you can play in the communication in your profession. And this is what I have been saying all along. As teachers, we still we are still seen as the bearers of knowledge, but we should maybe try to put ourselves in that role of the facilitators and teach our students that they have their value in the communication process, that they shouldn't expect validation from us. So frequently students say something and they go, right teacher, it's that it teacher. And you should just encourage them to keep going, because if they have done research, if they have prepared themselves, they should trust that they know how to do the work and then deliver information. And last but not least, how to evaluate information for credibility and authority. So we have this website, which is .edu, which we know is used for education, universities, higher education. I saw that they quoted with the full reference someone from UNESCO. I also saw that they were very careful in organizing information, so I know this is a credible source. And we have like literally to open websites and teach our students how to identify, even our adult students, to identify if a source is reliable or not. Or again, what are the implications of this source or that source, where they are coming from, what's their worldview. We should help them analyze all of that, or know how to analyze all of that. If you have been teaching for some years, you probably have seen slides or debate classes or book topics. They're just this: are you in favor or against abortion, the death penalty, same-sex marriage, talk in pairs? Wow, those are very core, complex issues of our society. They are not matters of are you in favor of against. So remember ethical responsibility. Just throwing this at students, it's a lack of ethics, because you're not allowing them to actually have access to the multitude of debates. You cannot count on having a variety of people knowledgeable on all of these areas in your classroom. And I remember it was maybe 4 years ago, the book unit was about crime, and the last activity was this. Students had to discuss these issues. And I was still very, well, I was overworked, of course, teaching many hours, so I didn't have a lot of time to adapt every lesson. And on top of that, I was thinking, oh, teacher talking time. I shouldn't say anything. I should just let them debate and just express their views. And so I did. And they said a lot of things that did not match with reality. That if you looked at the kinds of research done in different countries, different places, that was actually not the results we would find. But I didn't say anything because I thought, no, it's not my role. What should I have done, actually? I don't think I should have intervened in the discussion and started a lecture. Rather, I should have asked them to organize themselves in groups, offer them some parameters. What are the things you have to consider before we start this debate? Then have them Google different researchers, reports to build on the kind of arguments they could use. To deal with these issues, we have to prepare students for it. And they have to know that it's not just a matter of personal opinion, because it's an issue that affects society. It's a lot larger than the individual. So my suggestion, for instance, would be these are the topics. What are the most frequent arguments? And then brainstorm, hear them out. What does research show? Which factors should we consider? And then ask them to go for data, dates, location, sources. Have them do all this preparation work, because then there will be an informed debate. For instance, if some students are going to talking about abortions, for instance, if they're going to use religious justifications, it has to be clear that they have a religious background. If students are going to use they say, oh, it's the women's bodies, women's reproductive rights, they have to have information to back that up as well. So things to have an ethical debate, we need to have a clear outlook on every argument, and not just is it good or bad. All right. So I decided to take a post from our community, from Broad. I just shared the post from, it was a page that has shared the tweet from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which is a renowned dictionary. I just said nice and FYI for your information. The post was very popular, and it's talking about a new honorific. Mixed is a gender-neutral honorific for those who don't wish to be identified by gender. It's now in an unabridged, which means the larger extended version of the dictionary. 33 people liked it, 32 people loved it, 13 people laughed at it. And that bemused me, because why? Why were they laughing? And if you go back to the post, you see they are not talking about transgender people, non-binary people, gender fluid people. They're just talking about people who don't wish to be identified by gender. And any person can have this wish. Okay, but still the immediate reaction to the new, to the unknown was laughter. I'm actually surprised we did not get any angry reactions. But then again, Braille is a very well-moderated community. And some previous debates, I think people are now thinking twice before reacting. We did have 2 rude or misleading comments, one of which was erased. But again, as teachers, when it's a part of this is a part of the dictionary. So when you're teaching honorifics, you should be teaching it. Why? Because it's a part of the language. Whether you agree with it or not, it exists, and you shouldn't stop your students from getting the full awareness of the issue. Same thing if you don't teach Ms. All right? And if you teach all the honorifics, you're going to say Mr. is for men, and then for women you have Mrs., Ms., and everybody says, wow, why can't we have one for everybody? A lot of my students say that. Many students say that. And now we do, but then we have teachers who are laughing. So how are these teachers going to teach their students in a way that doesn't provoke this kind of reaction? Okay, that's a good question. We can talk about it later on. The rude comments really made me uncomfortable. And as I said before, even though they don't specifically refer to gender non-binary, transgender people, gender fluid people, I think it's important and enriching to understand that gender, as we perceive it, is also a construct of our modern colonial system. How do we know that? We can go to other communities that were not a part of this system, that were not constructed on the system, to see how they organized society hierarchically, or the biological differences. I offered two examples. You can see here on the screen. And this book is an academic research. It's very dense. But this article can allow you to promote so many different kinds of debates that it's not only going to be about gender, but also about culture and about different worldviews. So instead of saying, are you in favor of against trans rights? You can try to explore with your students the meaning of gender in different cultures and how that reflects our reality and our bodies and our existence. So our role should be to change the questions, change the perspectives, because this yes or no, good or bad, is not taking us anywhere. All right. But of course, I know that not always we'll have the time or we'll be able to do thorough research. But there are other tools we can use. In the recent shooting, after the recent shooting in New Zealand, the Prime Minister wore a headscarf. And one of the very hot topics in our current society is cultural appropriation. Is this cultural appropriation, isn't it? Another unethical way of approaching the debate is simply putting a picture of someone wearing an item of another culture and asking, is this cultural appropriation or not? Because you're not allowing your students to have access to the very broad, rich debate. But what did I find here in the comment section? And I know the comment section is fairly toxic and dangerous, but we have to accept that, by the way, our students will have contact with English in the written form in social media more frequently than in other forms if they don't live in English-speaking countries or work with in a place where English is the lingua franca, or so that we have to teach them how to deal with that. Anyways, so we have this picture of Jacinda, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Okay, and this user asked, serious question, is it disrespectful to wear a hijab when you're not a practicing Muslim? And then she got loads of replies. One user said, the correct term for the religion is Islam. The Muslim people are those who follow Islam. So here you see, in a respectful way, there was already reorganizing of the question, which is nice because, yeah, you're not obliged to know everything. But as far as you are respectful towards it, there should be like enriching debate and a debate that allows us to grow and to learn more. Some people said that it was not disrespectful at all. Most people said that it wasn't disrespectful, that it was actually an act of respect. But some of them Like fewer users thought it wasn't respectful. So what happens if you go to the comment section? It's not that people commenting are specialists, but you're very likely to see more worldviews. And I really like using Instagram for that purpose. And my tip to you would be use these very high profile profiles, like the Women's March. There are a lot of followers from different parts of the world. So don't choose very small, niched accounts for the purpose of giving students food for thought, because people following these smaller accounts are likely to have the same way of thinking and to come from the same, I don't know, theoretical background or tradition. So it's nice to see different opinions from different perspectives in this sense, without imposing anything and without asking true or false, good or bad. Uh, this is a loose reproduction of a book, very popular book. It's still very popular. The current edition is not like this anymore. But the first unit of the book was identity and what makes you you. So you started the semester, and that was the first thing you came across in the classroom. And the topics chosen for the identity units were the gender gap. And all the topics were like men and women, men and women. And this is a classic, not only from this book, but from so many materials. Extracts from Men Are From Mars, Women Are from Venus, but by John Gray. And even though John Gray claims to have updated his views, if you go and watch his lectures, you see that he still has a very biased perspective, and to my mind, very sexist. He says things like, women are more stressful nowadays because they are more in the workplace and they don't have the tranquility of the home. When if who are these women he's referring to? And tranquility of the home, this is even this is violent if we consider things that women have been through in the private sphere, when the private matters were considered issues between men and women, so how much they suffer, the amount of violence. So these kinds of texts are not helpful in this debate. Then they chose to use the song My Girl. It's about a woman who just can't simply understand her male interlocutor. She's hard. Um, then boyfriend and girlfriend arguing on the phone. Um, all of these things, especially for students who are not heterosexual or heteronormative, do not make a lot of sense. But they are forced to argue on these parameters because it's not one exercise, it's the whole of the unit. So this right here is gender ideology, by the way. Um, and it's the first unit. You start your course, I would want to drop out if I were in a class and I had to discuss this time and again. So, Natalia, are we not discussing relationships? Of course we are. What can we do? You can get opinions from different people, and then bring it to your students. And who do you relate to? Is this your reality? And then maybe show them their names. Uh, is this a matter of gender? You can ask that, but you have to bring the gender debate into your classroom, okay? Because what happens is, when you put the debate like this discourages people who do not agree with this worldview or who do not belong there to express their views. Because if everybody's going, yeah, it's like this, oh, my husband, he's impossible, oh, my wife, she's so hard, women are so mysterious, and things like that, then you won't actually be promoting debate or meaningful learning. You actually be discouraging your students. So a newer version of the same book still insists on this idea of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and a conversation between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and men's and women's conversation styles. And these things are so culturally informed. But when students see it as it is what it is, they find it hard to contest. So if possible, bring different approaches. Don't mark things by gender. Yes, do bring opinions. Yes, talk about arguing on the phone. But do it from a perspective in which students will be able to see themselves, right? On top of that, if you analyze a lot of these materials, you see that the debate about race is never that. And what makes you, you, is always connected to relationships and men and women. So how can you enhance and increase your students' repertoire and their knowledge of other aspects that are also relevant to one's identity? You might have to do this work because the materials we have access to are not always willing to. All right. And this doesn't only occur with adults. This is also present in teens' books. For instance, read the statements and underline the options that you think is true. And then there were like 10 statements, and boys and girls, men and women. And then now listen to a radio program about gender in education and work. Circle the answers the experts gave. Were they the same as yours? What happened? I stressed so many times to my students that the listening was not giving you true and false, right or wrong answers. Still, my teenage students, 11, 12-year-olds, thought that what they thought was true could not be true if the specialists were saying otherwise. So again, specialists, teachers, we are authorities. Our students do not think our regard and theirs are the same level. So even though this kind of activity tries to promote a sense of critical thinking, it's very difficult for 12-year-olds to do this when they are taught time and again in schools, at home, that they're supposed to respect authority. All right. And what happened in the audio was that, yes, they did say that women need better qualifications to get the same job, but they didn't say why exactly. And the conclusion was that women focus more on job satisfaction, while men focus more on promotion and pay rises. Well, that's tough, isn't it? They also said that boys had less time to study than girls because they had to spend more time practicing sport and playing video games, something like that. So you had this activity, and then you had listen again and answer the questions. Then you had some other questions for specific information. So they had to listen to it once, then they had to listen to it again. Remember the WhatsApp group, the WhatsApp image example I gave you? When there's repetition, when there's confirmation of the same thing, we want to be a part of it. So we tend to agree with that. Then the last activity was discuss the questions with the class. And then there were 4 or 5 questions. And the last one, are the ideas about men and women true in your country? It was the last question. We know that sometimes we don't have the time to cover all of them. And these didn't even have the number to say, so talk about question 5, talk about question 1. So I know that many teachers didn't even get to that last one. And at the same time, I had a teenage girl saying, then in the end I said, do you agree with what the expert said? And one of my teenage girls said, yes, I do, I think so. And then I said, really? Do you think you have more time than boys to study? And then she said, oh, well, no, not really. And I said, so you don't agree? And she said, yeah, but he's an expert, right? Um, and then I realized that we need to be very, very careful with all of that. So what do? Just forget about the course book, eliminate the listening? No, not necessarily. But we also have to look for other sources to allow our students to amplify the debate. All right. This article was shared by Andrea Hedlund. Am I saying your name correctly? Hope so. And I thought it was a very nice activity for us to do with our students. Instead of saying, is bullying good or bad? Is bullying right or wrong? Does racism exist? Yes or no? We can get an article like this, which is very straightforward. For instance, they cover many microaggressions and many different ways in which these can take shape. Because it's important for students to know that discrimination is not only one thing, bullying is not only one thing. So what you can do, for instance, is you get the example, whistling as a woman walks by. What is the message? You cover the message and try to ask your students to come up with it. Why not? And then you show the message they suggested. Because as I said before, a lot of times we take for granted that our students understand everything and they know how to reflect on everything. And we say, oh, whistling as women walks by is wrong because it's bad, because it's not good. We're not being helpful. We are just being prohibitive without explaining the rationale behind it. All right. So my final considerations are: be open and ethical. Being open doesn't mean readily accepting any sort of opinion or argument that comes up. In the age of fake news, we have to be we have this responsibility to set the record straight and say that fake news are unacceptable as arguments in an ethical discussion. We also have to know that issues such as same-sex marriage, are you against or in favor of it? This is hurtful and violent, especially if you have non-heterosexual students in the class, because you're literally discussing their civil rights, if they should be considered citizens the same way that heterosexual people should. And then you're exposing them to the debate and to of their the sometimes uninformed opinions of their colleagues. And this may create a harmful environment in your classroom. So know which kind of debates to promote. And if you absolutely have to talk about some issues, make sure that you do it responsibly. Reflect before you react. So if you come across a situation that makes you feel uncomfortable, that makes you want to laugh in a Facebook reaction or react angrily, before doing so, take a minute or two to think, why do I feel like this? What is going on? Of course, I'm not talking about violent, offensive statements. No, I'm talking about issues like gender issues, sexuality issues, issues that are posed as human rights issues that might seem at odds with what we have been taught, what we have been taught. But before you react, go to people, talk to others, go to the internet, take some time to reflect. I know that social media And even the classroom, sometimes we have the feeling that we have to react or we have to give an assertive answer instantly. Let's take a step back, take a deep breath, and take care of ourselves and take care of others. Teach your students to do research and to analyze information. Actually do the work. Have one full lesson to do that. Have your students give feedback on each other's work. Why didn't you do that? Oh, that's very nice. Show them that they have power and they also have the skill to do so and not to expect everything from you. Ask meaningful and different questions. Stay away from questions, good or bad questions. As I said before, these are taking us nowhere. We need to change perspectives. And again, you don't have to do work on your own. Outsource. Use Braille for it. Post things on Braille. Build partnerships. Sometimes you don't think you're equipped to teach something. Invite another teacher to do that. Even if the teacher cannot go there, be there physically, you can have a webinar, a conference, an online conference. Invite a specialist to be a part of your classroom, an ethical response, one that acts with ethical responsibility, but have other people and other voices in your classroom as well. It's okay to take a step. We are all learning. We cannot. It's okay not and to know in every issue. And again, even if you think you're an advocate of a cause, and you have to know there's still much to know. And there are reasons behind images that we see that we not be aware of. So instead of just being so sure of everything, let's always keep us in check and ask ourselves, why did I react that way? How can I improve it next time to make the world, this is going to sound corny, but it's to make the world a better place for you and for me and for everybody. So thanks everybody, and thank you very much, Browse. Hope you've enjoyed it.
That's it, Nancy. Thank you very, very much. I think my Sunday is full of things for me to think of. Definitely. We have some questions for you. The first one is from Chi Vega. He's asking, what can we do for the teachers who laugh at the MX post? How can we educate them?
That's a great question, and maybe we should have an open post on Braille to try to come up with different strategies. I think that what happens quite oftenly is that the people who are affected by it expose themselves and say things like, this is hurtful. I didn't like the way you reacted. This wasn't nice. But this is asking vulnerability of people who are vulnerable so often. So one thing that I said, for instance, the mixed pronoun is there for people who don't want to be identified by gender. This can apply to anyone. So come on, why are you laughing? You could use that as well. And if you wouldn't like to be referred to by that pronoun, why not? So ask throw the question back at the person, you know. And when we're very tired, we are also very tired of fighting these causes. And our reaction might be to respond angrily or give like a short answer. But especially in a community of teachers, we have to find different strategies. and people have to take turns as well, not only the same people trying to make the same time and again. If you think you've learned something, you step forward and then try to contribute to the debate.
Yeah, I think it's something that we have to discuss more and more and more. And as you said, different people have to come and join the conversation, because I really believe that different ways of saying the same thing might affect people differently, right? So yeah. I
That's a
have a
good point.
question myself. Do you have any kind of checklist or things that you always uh, remind yourself of checking when you're choosing materials to work with students? That is, okay, publishers are there, the books are ready, they're done. Not always do they bring ideal content, and we still have to cover it. So how do you do to assess the articles and videos and listening extracts that you give to your students?
Hmm, that's a good question. And you know, you've done Celta, right?
Yes.
And when all those questions that what are my CCQs, or what are the steps, what do I have to do? And after a while, we start doing it like automatically,
Uh-huh.
right? But we still do it. And that's an important point. So let me see. My questions are, is a reliable source? Who's this person? Importance in a debate? What does this image convey? What do I want to communicate? These are basically my questions. For instance, I was recently with a friend who's a writer, and a Brazilian writer, and she said that a teacher used one of her texts in a Portuguese as a foreign language class, and it was a short story about the life of housekeepers or maids. It was like very politically loaded and talking about it, and the teacher used it to teach. He said, come on, hey, you can teach the kitchen utensils, but you cannot empty the text of its other meanings. So I think that's a good point. We always have to be careful to see if we are dealing with the material in an ethical way.
True. And I think the challenge is to always have this careful look at anything that we're doing. We know that we're all very
Mhm.
busy and we all have lots of classes, lots of lessons, and make sure we still have this care with the students,
Mhm.
with the world, and with the kind of messages we're getting across to people, right?
Yeah, if we get into the habit of doing it, we'll start doing it automatically. That's the thing. Just like we do with our lesson stats and other parts of teacher procedure, that if we make it a part of our practice, I think it won't take as much time as it does at the beginning.
Right. Now, unfortunately, we don't have more time. It's 11 o'clock already. I think we could be talking about that for the whole day. But we really liked the idea of the open post on Browse, so we're definitely doing a follow up to the webinar using
Mhm.
your idea. Again, thank you very much for your time, for your consideration, and for this amazing lesson on how thoughtful we can be about the issues regarding not only women but people in general. So thank you
Mhm.
very, very much.
No, thank you very much for the invitation, and I would like to tell everybody that you can find me on Broad, and my email is also here on the presentation. And feel free to send me a message, an email, and yeah, let's build community instead of push each other away, right?
That's it.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you. So this is
Thank you,
the end of
Steve.
our Women's Month celebration. I hope you've liked it. Watch the other video if you haven't yet with Bruna Caltabiano and Cynthia Rodrigues. It's also amazing. And stay tuned for our initiatives. Remember, Browse on the Road is on September 7th, and the tickets, the sale tickets, finished today. So early bird fee enroll now. See
All
you.
right.
Bye bye.